Well, welcome to another edition of Rimshots with Sean, brought to you by Barstools and Bandtalk. And some people watching this may recognize this guy. It's my first time meeting him, but we have a mutual friend in Mr. Bobby Sisk out in Phoenix, Arizona. The one, the only, Mr. Steve Conley from Flotsam and Jetsam. How you doing, sir?
Good. How are you?
Oh, I'm hanging in there. So, outside of that band, you were telling me that you were playing last night. You play in a band that does Styx, and Journey, and Toto. So, wearing two hats, is that sort of just a kind of a fun thing for you?
No, I mean, obviously I love to play, but it's financial too. I mean, we're musicians, and that's what we do. And I do session work, and tour with Flotsam. And when I'm home, I try to do a lot of gigs, and I have another gig that I do during the day too when I'm not touring. So it's kind of one of those things where it's just keeping the plate full.
I love that because a lot of people, and especially people that get into, I guess, more significant bands or more known bands, they're less forthcoming with I get a day gig or I'm doing it, and I think it's cool that you do that because I think there is a good message there. Some people just think, you know what, I'll just play and barely make my rent and barely pay my bills, and so good on you for doing that.
If you want to do that, more power to you. But I've done that.
Yeah.
It is actually tough because if you think about it, what normal job will allow you to tell them, hey, I'm going to go to Europe for 5 weeks. I'll see you when I get back. The first thing they're going to say is, yeah, nice try. You know what I mean? So I fell into something like right around before COVID that turned out to be kind of a godsend. And it allowed me to have the freedom to tour and play. And it paid really well. So it was something I fell into, and I'm definitely thankful to be more in this situation now than the struggling musician thing. I think at some point, if you're 20 years old, okay, fine, go ahead, man, do that. But as you get older, you can't. That's not realistic.
No, you're right. You're right, and I think the one part about what you just did though is key because I find now in this whole age of if I see one more, like I'm a drummer, right? If I see one more 7-year-old doing Tom Sawyer flawlessly, I mean, somebody's like, oh, they're amazing. Well, they should be because I'm going to guess you and I are kind of the same vintage, and you and I had to learn the hard way. Like there was YouTube videos, right?
Yeah, it was work.
Yeah, it was work. Absolutely. Like
it's handed to you on a silver platter now.
Right. I saw this thing the other day. There was like 9 camera angles of stuff that Simon Phillips was playing, and I'm like, good Lord, it was hard to even figure out 1 or 2 fills back. And then I think about the guys like Bonham and Keith Moon and Jimmy Page when they were learning how they had to do it, right? It's really, you're set up for success nowadays, really.
Yeah, I think the thing that a lot of people don't understand, though, that they're probably missing the point when you watch those videos is there's a difference between musicians and content creators. And let's not get the two mixed up, because doing 500 takes in front of your webcam till you get it perfect is great and more, that's awesome. But at the end of the day, what it takes to go play in a band, get in a van or a bus with guys and deal and write records and do that whole thing is something completely different than sitting in your room showing off in front of a camera for YouTube. It is not the same thing.
I'm going to quote you on that as soon as we're done. There's a difference between musicians and content creators. That's the first I've heard it in that context. And it's like, yeah, because I mean, you just get overloaded with this stuff, right? And I mean, like your band's been around a long time. Like, when did you first get involved with Flotsam?
It's going on like 10, 11 years now.
And so the band was together, since the 80s, like late 80s?
Like 40 years now, or 30 years. It's like coming up on 40 years, I believe, that they've been doing it.
So that style of music, put it in perspective. Those guys were learning from, the Budgies and the Diamond Heads and and putting on vinyl records and putting stacks of quarters on the arms so they could slow it down to figure stuff out. People don't get that, right?
No, they don't. And I used to give a lot of lessons, and I would laugh at students because I'm like, look, you guys got it easy. We're gonna pull up YouTube. You can find all this information. You can go to Songster and get your tabs and all that BS. and that's fine. It makes it quick. It's instant gratification to learn how to play something and get the information instantly. And in the old days, if somebody called me, and we'll call the old days the 90s before the internet, somebody called me and said, hey, I need you to fill in on a gig, and I got 40 songs, and it's Journey and Van Halen and Ozzy and all this stuff. And you're like, holy shit, I got to learn a lot of songs. And guess what? There's no free ticket unless the song was published in Guitar Player magazine and the tab was there. You're going to have to sit down and do a whole bunch of work, you know. Now, for me to learn a cover song when my band's like, hey, we don't ever practice. In 5 years, we've never done a rehearsal. The guys are super pro. They're like, okay, we're going to learn this Rush song. Everybody show up and know it. And everybody shows up and they play it at the gig and they know it. You know what I mean? So,
love it.
You know, you can go and get the information and watch a guy play it on YouTube and play it great and have the song learned in like 20 minutes. You know what I mean? So it's like, it cuts your work time down. But there's something to be said about the time you put into learning that from the old days.
I love that. Are you born and bred from Phoenix?
No, I'm from Kansas City, Missouri. Okay,
so I'm glad you said that, because my next question would have been maybe a little awkward. But what is it about Phoenix that attracts so many musicians? Because I mentioned I interviewed Ken Mary, and I've had Mick Brown on the show, and Chris Katera, and I mean, there's just
I played with Chris. All my friends are on your show. That's funny.
Well, and Dwayne Miller from Keel, and I mean, what is it about Phoenix?
I moved here because of a divorce. I was a kid, you know, in high school. I spent my last 2 years of high school in Phoenix. So that's how I ended up here. I know when I first got here in the late 80s, there was a really thriving music scene here. So the guy that I took guitar lessons from was in this band Icon, and his So John Aquilino hooked me up in my first band. I'd never played in any band, and his brother was a killer singer here in town, you know, a lot older than me, and he hooked us up, and I played my first band with, you know, really experienced guys. And he used to talk to me all the time about how cool the scene was. And when I first got into it, it was still pretty good. I mean, there were so many places to play, and it wasn't all cover bar bullshit. It was lots of bars doing original bands. There was tons of original bands in Phoenix. But the 90s came and it killed all of that. Like, it just started to, when grunge hit, you saw those bars, you know, start to disappear one by one.
Yeah.
So I think that people love the weather. It's cheaper than California, I think, is the real reason. And it's close to California, so you can get there in 5 hours drive. And it's cheaper to live here, or was. And I think that's probably what attracted a lot of people.
Bobby's been on me to get out there. What is it in April? The big bike event.
Yeah, Bike Week. Yeah.
So we'll see. He, but you know, one of the things that, and he has mentioned that scene, and eerily similar to what you're talking about, grunge. I mean, here in Halifax, where I'm from, if you look on the map, we're way in the east coast of Canada, but we became the Seattle Light because Sub Pop Records came into Halifax, and if you know, there was bands that were together 2 weeks that were getting record deals, and just the whole bottom just fell out of the industry. It was just unfortunately too not a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So you said you've been with these guys 10, 11 years. So I guess the first question, because I mean, when I was talking to Ken, everybody before COVID was doing a lot of things, but Flotsam's been a super active band, always has been. What do you guys have coming up in the next bit? Are you going to be going out for a run in the summer?
I'm actually leaving in a couple days.
Nice.
We're going to do a West Coast run of dates, and one in Canada.
Where about?
North of Seattle, the Rickshaw Theater. It's in what city is that?
Probably like Vancouver or something.
Yeah, Vancouver. Yeah. And then when we get back 10 days later, we go to South America, Brazil, to play Summer Breeze Festival. And then in the summer, we are playing in June. Late June, we're playing. We've got Grass Pop coming up, Dynamo. Then we go back again in August for Vakken and some other festivals. So, we got a lot of stuff going on. And the new record is getting mixed right as we speak. We're getting mixes back from the engineer that's mixing it, and that should come out sometime I'm just guesstimating late summer.
So in terms of when you guys write, I didn't talk to Ken about this, but what's your process? Because everything is so different these days. I mean, everybody has a home studio. You don't necessarily have to go in and have everybody in a studio and do things. What's your process from, I guess, cradle to grave, from when you start demoing and writing songs to the finished product?
So we all write songs somewhat by ourselves, or me and Mike Gilbert do. Okay. So like I'll do demos. I'll use Superior Drummer. I'll demo up a full song, and then I'll send it to Eric and Ken, and Mike does the same thing. And then between Eric and Ken, they'll, Eric will do the vocals, or Ken will write some stuff. They'll work on it together or whatever, depending on the song. And then Ken will, if we figure that it's a winner, it's going to be album quality tune, then Ken will track the drums and, whatever to the tune. And so, we do it kind of separate. Me and Ken have done a lot of projects for a long time. I've known Ken for quite a long time. Like I said, I worked on the Fifth Angel record with him. We've done a bunch of other stuff together. We do a lot of stuff too through Zoom. So like we're doing right now. We'll have Pro Tools up and he can hear me play or whatever. And we might talk about some song parts and I'll spit out a bunch of stuff. We do a lot of session work like that too, for clients of his that need me to play guitar on something, and I'll play and he'll just be on the other end going, yeah, I like that. Can you do something more like this? And we'll, so yeah, but it's pretty much segregated at this point. We don't have to get together in a band room, and then we'll figure out, because if you do a record, how many songs are you actually going to play off the new album? Maybe 2 or 3 at most. So you may never play those songs again after the demo. So we just, after that, if we're going to play live, then we'll learn the tune,
This is a very interactive interview because you're saying some things and you're triggering some questions, and I want to throw this out because when COVID was taking place, I would tell people, anybody who took advantage of technology. So if you're not sitting around, a lot of people are sitting around feeling bad for themselves, right? And I get it. But if you were taking advantage of technology and learning and using it, the people that, when it stopped, were going to be further ahead of the game. So you guys were doing that, but my thought was the parlays into things like backing track. And I mean, I know it's a salacious topic. I'm guessing you guys don't have to use some, but I'd like to get your kind of 2 cents on that, because really, in a sense, the art of making records now is essentially backing track based, right? You're not in a studio often, with a bunch of people. It's very, I guess, sterile and sort of a solo effort for a group dynamic.
Right. Most people today do not make records, and there's going to be some exceptions to this rule. Okay. Most people do not get in a room together as a full band like they did in the 70s and make a record. That's not usually how this works. Usually the drummer will track the songs and everybody will play their parts after that, one at a time. You know what I mean? And we all have home studios. Every guy in my band pretty much has Pro Tools. And so, except for AK, he'll go to Ken's. Ken owns a big studio, so he'll go to the studio and do his vocals. But I have tons of gear at my house. I do all my stuff. Mike Gilbert, same thing. We just do our stuff from home. So, I mean, I don't think anybody's, unless you really want that thing, most people aren't doing records that way.
Well, it's good. The reason why I say it, Steve, is because, I mean, if you follow Blabbermouth, it's kind of funny. Every second headline, blah, 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 says backing tracks are garbage, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's all right. Okay. And there's an art to not necessarily using backing tracks live, but to prepare yourself to do that so that you can record and get comfortable with not playing with people in a room.
The backing track thing that I think that they're talking about, and you asked if we use them, 90% no, 10% yes, and I'll tell you why. So we do have some songs that have orchestration and keyboards on it. We don't have a keyboard player, obviously, and why would you hire one for 3 songs? If you have a song that's a great song and has all this big strings and stuff, well, you kind of want that to be there live. So you put it on a click and you play to the click and there's strings there, there's no guitars, there's no solos on these tracks. You know what I mean? It's so some people have gotten carried away with it. There are bands that have tons of stuff on their, I mean, it's like everything, right? Those are the people that are getting massacred. I mean, even in my cover band, we don't have a keyboard player. So when we play Journey, yes, all the keys are on a thing. It's a 4-piece band. I don't want to pay a keyboard player. And sometimes the stages when you're playing covers are too small to add an extra guy, and the club doesn't want to pay you extra money. And it's like, I'm not playing for $50, $100 a night. I'm not doing that. So therefore, I don't see a huge problem if you're doing backing tracks in that aspect. If it's just keyboards or it's, some orchestration stuff or an intro, it's like, who cares? But if you got walls of guitars and lead vocals on there, then yeah, that's a problem. Sure. I could see why people would get pissed about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no question. And I mean, in certain settings, it's fine, but it almost became like you would read some stuff and it's almost like dishonorable if you do it because you're cheating. And it's like, okay, so I would be fine listening to somebody struggle to do a song first. You know what I mean? I just don't understand it.
It does get a little dumb, and sometimes I think that some of the guys that are complaining about it are just mad because maybe their band doesn't sound good live, and they went out on tour and got smoked by a band that had some of that going on, and they were like, oh, they use backing tracks, blah blah blah. Yeah, well, they sound great, didn't they? People got their money. Exactly. You went and enjoyed the show because it sounded killer, and your band sounded like a bar band. Sorry,
Well, I don't understand why people don't get the fact that you show your support by buying a ticket, and if you don't like it, don't go. It's really simple.
Right, absolutely. And like you said, you're wearing a Kiss shirt, right? Everybody was giving Paul Stanley. Yeah, there you go. I went and saw Kiss, and do we want to go see Kiss suck? No, we want to go see Kiss end their career in all its glory, and we want to enjoy hearing, all these songs, and we want them to sound good. I don't want to go see Kiss sound like some broken down biker bar band. Like, what the hell is that all about? So if there's some extra backing vocals on something or whatever, am I going to cry about it? No. You know what I mean? The guy's like 70 years old. Do you think his voice is gonna, Paul Stanley, how could you possibly sing like that? That guy had one of the greatest rock and roll voices of all time. And how are you gonna sing in that register at 70 years old? There's like one guy on the planet that I know of that can do that, and it's Glenn Hughes.
Yeah. Well, he's a freak of nature, that guy.
Yeah, exactly. That guy is a walking freak of nature, and I love it. Every time I hear him sing, I just start laughing. I go, God bless him, you know what I mean? His shit's working like he was 20 years old.
He's a boy. There's a thing on YouTube that I found when everything was shut down. It was I think it was the 5th anniversary, John Lord's birthday or something. They were doing a full orchestra over at the hall in the UK, and it was they were doing Burn with Ian Pace, and Bruce Dickinson was singing with Glenn Hughes. Go look it up. I'm telling you, Dickinson was awesome. Glenn Hughes, I was just like, oh my God, this is just beyond. The guy, he's incredible. Yep. So, you said the album's going to be out mid to late summer. When you guys are playing, so how long is your show for starters? And I guess the second part of it is because you mentioned, okay, maybe 1, maybe 2 songs get played off a new album. So what's, I guess, the struggle with the old versus the new, and making sure that there's the songs that people want to hear, and when you're crafting that show? So
this is a highly irritating subject for me because being a new member in a band that has 15 records, right? I write a lot of songs in Flotsam, and you get promoters that book the band and come with this nonsense about, we only want the first 2 records. I love the first 2 records. I've been playing the first 2 records for, I don't know, 11 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They have 15 albums out. Like, so there's people that are actually willing to pay and dictate that we only play old stuff. Now, the funny thing is if you go look on YouTube, then some of the newer songs get more views than the old stuff. And, and Spotify are getting more streams than the old stuff. Like, and at some point I like playing the old stuff. It's like Iron Maiden not playing the Trooper. You don't want to piss your fans off, right? But new music, just because you're a older band doesn't mean that the new stuff isn't quality. You know what I mean? And how do you grow that new stuff if you're not playing it?
Yeah, and I mean, well, you mentioned Maiden. I mean, they did a whole tour of not playing any of the classics, and people went, but then people revolted, and they went back and they did a whole classic tour. So I mean, it's a fine line.
It is. You have to do both. You have to we try to interweave both in. and not go too far with it, but we understand that people want to hear I Live You Die. They want to hear No Place for Disgrace. They want to hear the classic Hammerhead and all that stuff. And we're happy to give it to them, and we do every time, but we do like to play new stuff because it's a different lineup, and this will be our 4th record with this group of guys. So,
Well, so I'm telling you, man, you keep pulling good questions out of me here, I think. But so with your band, been around forever. Obviously, there's been people that started out in the band that are no longer there. You often hear bands that are out touring. Up here in Canada, there's a bunch of classic bands. There's one band that they're called Doug and the Slugs. The singer
Mm-hmm.
Doug has been dead for almost 20 years, but they're still going to go out and play, or they still go out and play. Mm-hmm. What's your take on that? Because again, some people are like, it's not the real band, it's a cover band, and some people are like, it's amazing, it's better. What's your take on that?
Okay, so yeah, this is an interesting. Me and Ken talk about this all the time. So an interesting thing is happening also too with a lot of the 80s hair metal bands. You've got a lot of guys that are missing from those original bands, and they're still out playing. And what happens is that, look, a lot of people grew up on that music and they love that stuff, right? And the guys get older and they don't, they can't do it. People pass away, and the brand becomes important. The brand is really king. If you have a brand, you can technically still go out and play. Now, there's going to be purists that are going to be upset about it, but look at Foreigner. Foreigner sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you going to say? I mean, they sound kick-ass. And if you love Foreigner tunes, okay, Mick's not in good enough health to go out and do it all the time, and whatever, it is what it is. And it's like, I mean, there's people still going to see them. They're a totally successful touring band. They sound fantastic. It's like, it's a brand. Somebody owns the brand, and they're able to go out and do it, and people are still showing up, and those songs are going to be huge for a long time because they're classic songs. They're epic. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I've got a friend that equates it like this. Like if you go to a McDonald's and you have the one McDonald's that started in California when Ray Kroc started it, but then you go to a second one, it's like, oh, well, you're not going to the real McDonald's. Well, you know what? You're getting something, and sometimes it's maybe better. It's a silly argument. Again, if you don't like it, just don't go. It's really super simple to me.
Well, the other thing to that is that, there is a time span in the bands that we love, and when they go away, then what? What if you don't have anything coming up behind it? This is good, you know what I mean? So you're kind of forced to, as we get older, if you like that music, you kind of want to go see it, and, so I don't know.
Man, you brought up another good point, because that's something I struggle with all the time, especially here locally, where I'll see a band and it's like, man, they just don't get it. And then you'll see some kids in their 20s that just friggin' rock, and you go like, yes, there's hope for the future. Are you have you seen anybody in the last bit that you go, yeah, you know what, I do feel like I'm not going to be 95 having to go out there, keeping this thing going?
Oh man, now you open Pandora's box. So I feel really bad for the younger bands. The business is in a very strange state. I don't know that people. So I don't think you're ever going to see another Iron Maiden again as long as we live. That makes me sad. Iron Maiden was my first concert in Kansas City. I was a huge Iron Maiden fan. I loved the band. I bought all their records as a kid. I just loved them. And that concert was kind of life-changing. It's probably why I'm still sitting here doing this nonsense today. But in order for a band to grow and become Iron Maiden in this climate is almost unattainable. If you look at the record companies, the way they're handling business with streaming, there's no way for young bands to make, really, unless something happens through social media and some weird thing happens and it just explodes. You're really not going to see another AC/DC, a Led Zeppelin, an Iron Maiden, a Van Halen. I don't think it's possible for that to happen again. I don't know. And when you go out and you play and these kids figure out that you can't make any money doing this and that you can, we're going to go back to the musician and content creator conversation. When you figure out that you can sit in your room and play a guitar lick, or if you're a girl, you can put on your leather corset and let your tits hang out, and you can do a guitar video and get 1 million views because you're gorgeous, and you could play a Randy Rhoads solo and get, you know, a check from YouTube or Instagram. Now we have a problem because you're not growing anything. You're a content creator. People are looking at your tits. You know what I mean? And I'll give you a perfect example. I'm going to use a guitar player that I think is absolutely fantastic. I don't know the guy, so I'm giving him props. The guy from Black Dahlia Murder, Brandon Ellis, is probably one of the best metal guitar players I have ever seen. If you just sit down and watch his videos of him playing, it's effing jaw-dropping. I mean, his vibrato, everything about that dude's playing, to me, is so top-notch. I mean, he's amazing. He's one of the dudes that I will watch his videos and just sit there and go, holy shit, you know? I mean, the guy's amazing. He'll get, like, hardly any views. And then I'll see some kid on, you know, and he's in a known band. And then I'll see some kid or girl, you know, post some video, and all of a sudden it's like, you know, 20,000 views or something. I just scratch my head and go, yeah, there's a problem here. You know what I mean? And I don't say that out of jealousy. I just say that it's a weird conundrum that we've run into. And I don't know if you knew this, but I think there was a thing in the music business that about 70% of the music that's being bought and consumed is still old music.
I did not know that. That's interesting.
Yeah. So that's a scary number, because you're talking about people are still holding on to the old stuff, and the new stuff isn't moving the needle like it should. You know what I mean? People are still, it is the most selling stuff. It's the stuff that does the well. It's the most radio played stuff, is usually older music. So
that's cool. And I'll tell you, I totally agree with the whole, what you were saying about the guitar player there, because, you know, I did an interview a number of months ago, and it was a great guest, great conversation. It got, I don't know, 1,000 views. And then the next day, some guy goes out in his back deck feeding raccoons, and it went viral. And I wish I could say I was joking, and you sit there and you go, what the heck? But we mentioned Kiss, and a guy that I've got to know really, really well is Michael Brandvold, who used to manage their website and all that stuff. And Michael always says to me, don't worry about the views, worry about the engagement. Now, if that kid's getting 1 million views over that other guitar player and getting the engagement, well, then the argument goes. But that's the problem now. There's no engagement. People are just click on to the next, click on to the next, and they don't get into it. They don't get invested in it. And it's really sad. You're bang on. Music right now is just very bizarre.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's another conversation that we've had in the band, you know, how to get people to engage in something when you have so much of this going on, right? Every kid is over here. Your attention span in today's times with all our gadgets is like 3 seconds. I mean, you got like 3 seconds to be intrigued by something enough to watch it, or you're like, click next, you know what I mean? And people scroll through social media stuff just out of boredom. And what makes people stop and their interests, who knows, you know what I mean? So it's really hard to get people to engage, and that is a thing, you know, for sure.
Well, now you get this whole AI movement, which is another kind of,
oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, somebody that has like zero talent, they can't even tie their shoes, or writing an Iron Maiden song, you know what I mean? It's just bizarre.
Right. And have you seen how they're doing they've got an algorithm that allows AI to write styles of music. So my thought with that is at what point do they get that, which it'll be quick, do they get that to sound good enough that people want to consume these AI songs, and then they don't need us anymore?
Right.
You know, like what's the point, you know? So I think I really hate to be a downer on the stuff, but I just feel like it's almost a dying industry, you know, to some degree.
Yeah, pardon me. And it is sad. And I mean, I get your point, because there's a lot of people I talk to, I'm old school. Old school to me kind of gives the connotation that, you know what, I'm preparing to give up. But I also understand how it's a sign of frustration. And, you know, you kind of pine for the way things used to be done, because there's nothing quite like an analog record to me as opposed to digital. You know what I mean? It's just warm. And
I just think too the business is geared now for you almost not to be able to make any money.
Yep.
I think people go see bands play in Europe and man, they're playing Wacken, they must be making money. It's like, well, okay, you realize that the cost for that band to get on the plane and go to Europe for the show was $7,000. Okay, so let's start there. And then your day that you get in, you got to get a hotel. The festival gives you a hotel the day of, the night of the show or whatever into the next day. That's part of the deal. But, so it's like the costs of going there and doing the show are astronomical from from America to Europe. So when you go to Europe, you're in the hole the minute you land. Like, so, and in general, I don't see Europe crowds buying as much merch as a American crowd. They buy merch, but the numbers aren't the same. So, that's a different thing that's going on over there, so you're kind of like, well, but Europeans will travel 4 or 5 hours on a train to come see you play. Right. That doesn't happen in America. What I mean?
Well, I was over
in an hour of my house. I'm not coming.
Yeah, exactly. An hour might even be a little bit of a stretch. Exactly. I was in Dublin in August. I went over there and I played a wedding and then hung out for 5 days. And the one thing that I kept saying when I was there was like, if I was a musician, I don't know that I would actually leave Europe. I would, because I remember standing in there was a walking street and all 4 corners were bars at 10 in the morning and there's all kinds of different music. And to me, it just seems so vibrant and cool.
In Europe.
It's and I mean, their scene over there, I don't know what it is. It just seems, do you feel like maybe now that everything's opened back up, that people are maybe taking music a little bit for granted? They forgot that they lost it 4 years ago?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I never thought of it that way. I mean, when we've gone over there, we just went over there not too long ago and all the shows, and it was this club stuff, were sold out. So, I mean, it was great. And I had a blast. We were in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, we do really well. So we played like literally in a span of places that were only a couple hours apart. Every show was sold out in the same country, which was kind of odd, so wow. that was cool. But yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know if people take it for granted. I think the festivals, there's still people there. There's still people going to shows. Europe, going to shows is a big part of what they do. Like Europeans, because of the way their society is set up, you have a city center. Everybody can walk places. They've got public transportation to get places. It's not like America where our cities are so spread out. And I just think people over there, when the weather's nice or whatever, they want to get out. They live in smaller spaces. If you've ever been in a hotel in Europe, it's a smaller space. I think there's a lot of smaller living spaces there. They want to get out and do stuff. They're not like Americans where they sit in their house and, don't go anywhere. They're really out and about. So I think that going to shows is a big part of their thing for people that are into music in Europe, because the shows seem to really do well. And some of those festivals over there are just insane. I mean, Hellfest, 70,000 people. It's Wacken, 70,000 people. I mean, it's insane when you go see that. You're just like, look at all these people. You know what I mean? So,
well, and I mean, it's funny in Dublin, there was no ice machines in the hotel. You had to go to the bar to get ice.
Right. Little things they don't do ice there. They haven't figured out the recipe yet. That was the only joke,
Although you can get a Guinness in any bar ice cold, like it was hilarious. But I remember leaving the airport, 8 in the morning, and there's people drinking Guinness with their bacon and eggs. It was unbelievable. But so listen, man, this is Sunday. You probably got to go to church soon. Kidding, but
that's funny.
Where are my viewers going to find out about what you guys are up to and about you and what you have going on? Because you mentioned you have students, so you're teaching, you're doing all kinds of things.
I don't teach anymore. I used to. Okay. I kind of, after a bunch of years of doing that, once I got into my regular gig, I was like, okay, I don't have time to really do it anymore. And teaching is a bit of a different game than it used to be. With YouTube being around, it makes it harder, So, just, it kind of got burnt out on it. I did it for a long time, but
fair enough.
Yeah. So, people find out what we're doing from the website flotstiltdeath.com or the Facebook page, and so that's about that. So,
well, I really appreciate you doing this on a Sunday when we both had gigs. Mine was a little later than yours, but that's fine. And let's stay in touch, man. I want to hear how it's going, and all the best.
Yeah, you too, bud. Thanks for having me, man.